Look, I'll be honest. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is by far my least played 3D Zelda game. I always enjoyed the story, the characters, and the dungeon design. However, there was always something that was keeping me from going back and revisiting this iteration of Hyrule. The motion controls. By the time that Skyward Sword came out, it was at the end of the Wii's life cycle, so like many other people, I was kind of burnt out on the motion control era. That being said, 10 years later, Skyward Sword HD for the Nintendo Switch once again aims to bring me back this beautiful story and even gave me options to take away the things I disliked so much from the original game. Since it's in the name of the title, the big noticeable change is the graphics being upgraded from 480p 30fps on the Nintendo Wii version to 1080p 60fps on the Switch, making this the first 3D Zelda game to be playable natively in 60fps. Skyward Sword HD does a lot to rectify the issues that plagued its original Nintendo Wii release. As mentioned before, the big one being that motion controls are now optional. For people like myself who don't like them, you cannot use the right analog stick to control Link's sword. It does take a little getting used to, but overall, once you get the hang of it, makes for a more streamlined experience. One where you don't have to explain to someone why you're flapping your arms like a bird to get Link's loft wing to soar higher in the skies. One of the more minute changes that comes with this is the free roaming camera. In the original game, the camera was always locked behind Link, only able to be moved by Z targeting, which was clunky to say the least. Now the camera can be controlled in one of three ways. When playing with motion controls using the Joy-Cons, the right analog stick will be used as the camera. In button-only controls, since the right stick is used for the sword, you have to hold the left shoulder button and then use the right stick to aim. It's a solution, but I wouldn't say it's the best one. And finally, you can use gyro controls on either control method. The next big improvement over the original is the improvements to the progression in the game. In the remakes of The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, Nintendo made drastic changes to their fetch quests to streamline the process of getting through those portions of the game. However, in Skyward Sword, those quests have been unchanged, in favor for a much better option: the ability to make Fi, your personal assistant/companion, silent for the majority of the game. For anyone who has played the original version, you'll know that Fi is up there with the most annoying navigation characters in the Zelda series, constantly reminding you to do something while you're already doing it, that your Wii Remote batteries are low, and just bringing the game to a halt every time you're doing something. Now in this version, you can toggle her off completely, a much needed, much appreciated change for sure. Also in the way of streamlining of progression, the unnecessary text reminding you about what a rupee or stamina vessel is each time you load the game up has been removed as well. Nintendo has gone out of their way to make this game much more accessible and streamlined, and I welcome all of these changes wholeheartedly. Finally, you can also skip dialogue, cutscenes, and speed up text boxes this time around as well. Welcome additions that help speed up the extra long opening tutorial and get you into the real parts of the game much faster. All of these changes are welcome, but what about the story itself? Granted, this is a remake, I'm tempted to delve into particular story bits, but since this could be your first time playing this game, I will keep it as spoiler free as much as I can. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword has one of the most amazing stories in a Zelda game. I'm going to do my best to limit the amount of comparisons to Breath of the Wild and keep them at a minimum. But if that game was your first Zelda title and you were upset about the way the story was handled, then Skyward Sword is going to be a welcoming change of pace to how its story is told. The story this time around is set at the very beginning of the Zelda timeline, something that some people probably aren't aware of even existing. Given that this game isn't the first game ever released though, there are several connections to future titles that Zelda fans will definitely take notice of, and references to characters, whether it's their distant relatives or past incarnations, that will bring about some nostalgia. The characters in this game offer so much personality compared to previous entries in the franchise. Zelda at times can be spunky and sassy towards characters like Groose, while also being playful and flirtatious towards Link. Groose, however, which is already a meme in his own way, starts off as a typical bully that eventually develops into being one of the most memorable characters in the game. Even characters like Girahim, who you are expected to dislike, offer his own charm and personality that sets him apart from previous Zelda villains. I would delve more into the story and characters, but I will save that for your experience, so make sure you play the game. Skyward Sword HD offers two options for playing the game: motion controls and with button controls. For my first playthrough, I definitely stuck with the button-only controls through most of the time. I occasionally would get into my nostalgia feels and want to swap over to the motion controls just to swat at some bokoblins every once in a while. The button controls do make much more sense to me for most of the game. The janky controls for using items such as the beetle, flying the loftwing, and swimming underwater with motion controls are heavily improved on with just using the analog stick. The swordplay is hit or miss, literally. While I welcome the opportunity to turn off motion controls, it is kind of wonky at some points. To perform a strike, you have to quickly flick the control stick in the direction you want Link to swing. When you're trying to strike in a hurry, this can lead to misinputs that could cause you a game over screen. Also, there's the weird button presses to get the free camera to work in button controls. However, that is something that you get used to over time. With the motion controls, not much has changed from the Wii version. Again, the option to use the camera freely with the right stick is a welcome addition, but the core gameplay has only slightly changed due to using a Joy-Con over a Wii Remote. When the Wii Remote needed to be calibrated, you would set the controller down and it would fix itself. However, since the Joy-Cons don't use a sensor bar in favor of using gyro controls, you can recenter them by pressing the Y button, which doesn't take nowhere near as long as setting your controller down. But I found myself having to recalibrate the gyro controls much more often than I remember having to use the Wii Remote. Overall, there are options for everyone, but all of them have their own weird drawbacks. Nothing terrible, but definitely noticeable. One of the things that Skyward Sword and its HD remake nail in my opinion is their dungeons and bosses. The dungeons go out of their way to test your combat and puzzle solving abilities. The bosses offer engaging action, remarkable soundtracks that accompany them, and all put your skills to the test. In many ways, they are all memorable additions to the game and make you feel accomplished after defeating them. Except for Tantalus. I'll never understand where Tantalus came from and why it's in this game. Just, no. Skyward Sword HD does a lot to improve upon its original release 10 years ago. Graphical upgrades, new ways to play, and quality of life improvements fix just about all of my original gripes with the game. If you are someone new to the franchise or have only played Breath of the Wild, this game is going to be an instant classic that you'll want to revisit time and time again. For more information on The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD and anything else in the world of gaming, stay tuned to Next Gen Newsweek.